Welcome back, rail fans. It has been pretty much, I'd say, a year since I posted something. But there's good reason for that. About a year ago, I got to the point where we had enough of Riker Yard installed that we could do some test operations, and we never stopped. So we did, I think I ran an op session every month starting August of 2024. So once a month I've been hosting those, and we can move the dates around a little bit to work around other people's schedules, but pretty consistently having operating sessions, and that has been extraordinarily rewarding, super fun, and also driven me to continue as quickly as I can making progress on the railroad. So this is really cool here. This is at Moss Grove. We've got 7 empty Bessemer and Lake Erie hoppers set out for the Pittsburgh and Shawmoot, and those will get loaded up in the next session. Those will go to Butler and get interchanged onto the Bessemer and Lake Erie at Butler Transfer. So that's where I've been. Haven't stopped the hobby, haven't given up on this railroad, just got super immersed in operations. So I've got a long list. I'll try and get through it relatively quickly. So for operations, the first thing that became apparent is we have a slight grade here in Moss Grove before we get over to the Moss Grove, what will be the Moss Grove Bridge. And on the Dayton grade here, it became apparent that in both scenarios we might have to have trains leave their train behind and work. In this case, down here in the Echo siding, and clearly in the case of the Pittsburgh and Shawmoot interchange, they just have to set their train off or leave their train on the main so they can work the spur. So what we did is aesthetic at this point, not really. At this point it is just a blue painter's tape label. Probably can't see it, but there you can. In between the rails there's a little brass tube, and there is a piece of piano wire in that, and when you throw the switch, let's see if you can't really see it, but wire comes up and will hold the train. Just a switch here on the fascia. There is a red light on the fascia to let you know that it's engaged. The other thing it does is it also creates occupancy, which you can see on this ABS signal turned green. And that's not nearly as important. We'll zoom in on that when I put it back. Occupancy goes out. That's not nearly as important as what happens on the other side of that signal. If there was something coming into this block from either direction, it would show the block is occupied. So that would hopefully minimize the likelihood of someone accidentally running a train into our what's essentially a handbrake for these two grades to allow for operations. So the other thing that has taken quite a bit of time is I've done automatic block signals. These look very similar and have a very rudimentary TO on them. So these are train order signals, and I have 5 operating train order signals. Ultimately, these I think will be semaphores, but for efficiency and speed, just went with LEDs with color lights. These are controlled by the dispatcher using a combination of JMRI and Open LCC, using primarily railroad or RR circuits components. Didn't add them all at once. That was a progressive. I think I added a few at a time, and then each operating session added 1 or so more. I continued to add cars. We'll talk about that probably in a little bit. But here at Craigsville Siding, decent string of cars set out. These are all empties that'll serve the various industries on this section of the railroad. Really, I don't think there's anything new on this half, so we'll go to where the work is happening. So the first thing I got finished is the Elk Run branch, and this is basically on top of what will be Simpson Tunnel. Obviously that's not prototypically accurate, but compression is necessary. So the town of Elk Run is kind of perched on top of the Simpson Tunnel area. But this was just 3 industries that were here in 1974. We have Federal Laboratories, Jefferson Wholesale Groceries, and Airco Spear. This is just an abandoned siding that I thought was too close to the fascia, so turned it into a stub siding. Probably not totally unrealistic in the 70s for something like if this switch became defective, they might have just abandoned it. That was unfortunately the time of the 70s where a lot of railroads were in decline. So I went along with the theme on that one. But this gives the Riker yard crew a little bit of work to switch for the time being. This is also our helper pocket. This is really a siding to store cars, empties for these industries. But for now it's park and power for helpers and other power here in Riker because the locomotive facility is not done yet. But this entire section I think is all new since the last video, and the spurs are all hand laid code 70, which is what I've been doing. The main line is in the back. So this Elk Run, which used to serve the Adrian mines, this Elk Run spur is essentially the west end yard or south end yard lead for Riker. We actually changed the railroad from a east-west to a north-south because the 1974 timetable lists it as north-south, despite the fact that their 1971 perhaps marketing information, their marketing schedule reflects it as an east-west railroad. But most people who've been operating feel much more comfortable that Buffalo is north of Pittsburgh, so we're going to follow the accurate or more accurate approach, which is the timetable. So what else do I have? So again, I said there's 5 train order signals, so this one is a little bit more attractive. I put all the wiring on the back so it's a little bit more legible. You'll note this one also has a 4th light at the bottom. That is a lunar white at the bottom. The dispatcher can set that as well. So in addition to determining if the crew needs to stop for orders, get call for hooped up orders that they're still moving, or if it's clear of no orders, you can also indicate that there's a lunar, which indicates you need to leave the main either into a siding or a yard. So it just cuts down on train order scenarios a little bit to keep the phones free. Also here at RI, these are temporary. Let me see if, there we go. So this is where the automatic block signals and train order section of the railroad stops and the CTC section begins. So here I've got, and if I take my thumb off of it, it'll turn off. Here I've got 2 holdout signals. These will ultimately be CTC signals, but for now with the transition and as we build, these are just holdout signals. Actually, the dwarf on the left is operable by the dispatcher, but the main signal on the main line is just a red holdout at this point in time, but that will change. Also a good point is that this is a seam not only between CTC and ABS, this is also the seam between where I'm using, on the ABS I think I had showed previously that I was using Arduinos, and I'm using the RR circuits and OpenLCC for all of the CTC section. And believe it or not, I am not an electronics guy, but I did get the two to share 5-volt logic information with each other, which wasn't that complex, but at the seam it's important for them to exchange a little bit of information. I also used that to my benefit, which I'll show you later on the dispatcher's panel, to show occupancy onto the panel using the Arduino is basically sending a repeater 5-volt signal just to indicate occupancy for the LCC system to interpret and show on the panel. But from basically this point north, everything was going to be open LCC. In terms of motive power, I've actually owned this for a while. This is an SD7 that I'll convert to an SD9 by adding dynamic brakes primarily and renumbering it to the appropriate number. And while this is a unit you've seen many times, this is a new unit, and I also got another GP9 in Western Maryland paint. So I've added, I think, at least 3 locomotives since the last video, but perhaps more. I also just got enough decoders to install get additional locomotives onto the railroad, at least soon. I've got 2 scale trains, GP30s, in just the blue B&O paint scheme, which I'm very eager to get on the rails as well. You may recall that over here, the workbench used to be located. I removed that so that or relocated that, I should say, so that I could build. This is all temporary. It's all flex track and Atlas switches. So I will relay all of this, but for the time being, this is the Rural Valley branch. So if you recall, this comes off of basically just where we were, showing you that those grade brakes or the hand brakes in the town of Echo. There is a Y, or part of a Y, and that Y goes underneath Butler and comes out here. So that is where you exit the main to get onto the Rural Valley branch, and that is now somewhat complete. It's operational. Only had 2 mines in basically the 2 towns that it served, so pretty compressed again. So there's a siding here where empties are stored, and then there's 2 spurs here, 1 for each of the 2 mines. So believe it or not, that actually creates a decent amount of work. I think that job, off the top of my head, don't remember, but I do keep track just to try and get my sequencing and timing of trains in the operating sessions to work effectively. I think that one probably averages 90 minutes by the time you start up here in Riker Yard, run down to Echo, pick up some empties off the Echo siding, come here, work the siding in the 2 mines, pick through the right cars, get them set out at the right mines, and then come back all the way up to Riker to bring your loads up here. Often takes at least, an hour to an hour and a half. So that is another piece of progress. We'll go over here. You may recall, I'm not sure if you do or not, but the workbench is now into my utility closet, which is really convenient because I've got the slop sink here and all of my supplies and unbuilt kits. There's the 2 scale trains, GP30s. Also have another SD7. So this is all in its permanent location. Includes much more sophisticated and bright lighting. So now we're actually working on another turnout. So that's in its final location. And I had the dispatcher set up in the other room, but that was in the way. So now, I have the closet that I think I had showed the door for before. This is all sheetrocked and painted. And I'll slip in through the narrow door. This is actually left over from the operating session. It is not going to focus, but this is the staging track log. This is the north and south freight program, just describing each of the trains. This is just a metal. I was going to build a CTC panel, so I had some green paint for CTC, so I just bought a piece of steel, painted it, and now be able to use magnets to just change out the paperwork here. I have a siding capacity chart. Here is the train sheet from the dispatcher from the operating session just this past weekend, and not the greatest in the camera, but here is the railroad thus far. And like I said, you've got occupancy. What we chose to do is only show occupancy on either side, blocks on either side of what were manned operator towers. So there are sections here that are still dark, but that's on purpose. And by dark, I mean there's no occupancy that the dispatcher sees, can follow along with the fake magnets here. But we don't get, like here you can see occupancy. There's a train sitting on the northbound main in basically at Riker Yard. So that shows up as red. But everywhere else, like you've got WS is a tower, so you'll get occupancy indication on either side of that. But when you get out here up to Dayton and Valier, there are no towers here. The last tower was at KO, which is Echo. So that dispatcher doesn't get any information on occupancy there. He has to rely on his train sheet for that. But we did that to try and simulate the presence of an operator, and so far it's actually worked out really well. So I think we're gonna continue using that. So that is the dispatcher's office. I'm really excited to have that ready. Still, more improvements need to be made, but I did add a second light so that it is functional. Probably on this is the back side of, there will be staging, the terminal staging yard at the other end. This is East Salamanca, will be here. So probably on the back side of this is where I'll have all the stuff for the crews so that they can come interact with the dispatcher to get their trains periodically. They can come over, do that, get their paperwork, and then go out to the appropriate spot on the railroad. So in addition to that, I've bought a bunch more cabooses because I was running short on cabooses. So I think I bought, I don't know, 4 or 5 of the B&O bay window cabooses that either Roundhouse or Athearn made. I think they're all number 3000. So I've renumbered a few of them. I've got a couple duplicates, but more progress will be made eventually. I think I've added more than 100 cars to the railroad, many of which have resistor wheel sets on them. At this point, not all of my rolling stock has resistor wheel sets, but all the cabooses do. So the only scenario that'll really become urgent as we get into the CTC section, so that we don't throw switches underneath trains. But since the ABS section is all manual switches, just having the caboose and the locomotive is enough. And again, most of the trains have a decent number of resistor wheel set cars, but it depends. So that's more work that I'll have to do. Other thing I did, since I already have JMRI on my laptop, very easy. I went out and purchased a wireless router, and now I can support up to, like, I don't know, 60 or 90 wireless Wi-Fi throttles, which is great. Most of the people on the crew that I'm hosting have TCS Wi-Fi throttles, so I think I only own 5 wireless NCE throttles. Like, I think I have 3 like this, and then 2 of the smaller ones. I don't know that I need to buy any more of those because the crews bring their own, and they can get on the Wi-Fi network. And like I said, I don't think I'll ever need that many. This router JMRI and the router can host quite a few. So that is additional progress as well. And I failed to mention, I'm running the computer in the dispatcher's office is the computer that was replaced by my laptop. I refurbished that a little bit, added some faster memory, and now it's being used for the dispatcher. So that's actually running a separate version of JMRI just for the Panel Pro. So I've continued to extend bench work north out of Riker Yard. So this is the yard throat at the north end. So I forget how long it is, but I think the running track here will hold 32 50-foot box cars on it. So, with power, that's probably a 28 car train or something like that with power and a caboose. So this will be the yard ladder. At the top of the yard ladder, there'll be another track that comes into this will be the engine service facility. There's going to be a couple of tracks or ways to get into that. There's another switch here, and then there'll be 2 more down here. Trying to look at the prototype, it looks like when they transitioned from steam to diesel, they had some somewhat unique track arrangements that I'm going to try and mimic to the extent that I can. So here you're now out of the engine service facility. Then you start getting into, this is really your first interlocking. This will be the DC interlocking, which is between the running track and the northbound main. There is no way to get from the northbound main or southbound main over right here, but there will be 2 opportunities at least to do that over here at the XD and Clo interlockings. So this bench work is in basically up to the point where Clo Yard will start here, which is a smaller yard that was kind of waning at the time I'm modeling, and they were using it really for minimally as a yard, but a little bit of coal loading was happening there. I can show that on the track plan that's been, this is not the most current, but it's basically the concept. So we're coming around here, and this will be where Clo Yard is, and that's also where the Indiana branch splits off, or will be. So that is occurring, and if I don't trip over all my junk, temporarily I've got some cabling for the train order signals and occupancy for that whole section, but this is where the dispatchers, it was just a fold-up table, which I've now folded up because the LCC board is going to go underneath the bench work here. So I'm all got it cleared out so I can keep going with bench work. And then here's where we'll come into C&M Junction. The Clearfield branch will go over there and be above the Pittsburgh staging yard. And then there'll be a peninsula that basically runs down the middle here and then loops back and goes over top of the Rural Valley branch and into the terminal staging yard. So we are making progress. It is like I said, been really rewarding, and it's real. I'm glad we're doing it this way because we keep finding things that we have to tweak and adjust. I haven't really had to change any track thus far, but I'm glad that we're testing it as we go so that we're not having to radically change or pull anything out. So that's really useful, and it's been really a good process. I think I have reached the end of my list. All right, I think so. So that is it. I can't promise you I'm going to do this every month, but I just wanted to make sure everybody knew I didn't quit the hobby or anything. We're still doing it and still really enjoying it. And that is the update for summer of 2025. We will see you at some point soon.